As we've seen the Resident Evil series push forward throughout the years, so too has the evolution of the Tyrants. Seeing these behemoths stand up against our protagonists, ranging from Claire Redfield in Code Veronica, to Leon Kennedy in Resident Evil Damnation, and up to the new Resident Evil 2 Remake, as we fight our way against these large obstacles, who always give us players a challenging but yet fun time during our playthrough, helping make the respective Resident Evil titles so memorable. Anyways, what's up you guys, this is DeVuH, and in this video we're going to be covering the many Tyrants that's made their appearances throughout the Resident Evil series, as we break down some of their encounters and traits, to their in-game battle mechanics, and their overall impact in the storyline of the respective Resident Evil titles. But before we get started, I do have another video that is the first part of the evolution of the Tyrant series that I uploaded a couple of months ago, so if you guys want to watch that video before this one, I'll leave a card to that video on the top right section of your screen so you guys can check it out. Also, there will be a third part to this video series that also covers the Umbrella and Darkside Chronicles Tyrants, so stay tuned for that in the near future. Alright, so let's start off with a quick synopsis of the Tyrants and an overview of the ones that I covered in the first part of the series. So these Tyrants were mass produced by the pharmaceutical giant the Umbrella Corporation after they acquired and engineered the progenitor virus to become the widely known T-virus, as their goal was to produce as many of these bioorganic weapons so that it can be used for military combat purposes. But there was a snag in making so many of these monsters, because only 1 in 10 million people would have the genetic makeup to become a viable Tyrant. But luckily for Umbrella, one of their executives by the name of Sergei Vladimir was a viable candidate, where he had the rare genetic makeup that would allow them to mass produce these monsters through cloning, which this subsequently led to the many Tyrants that we fought in the older Resident Evil titles, starting off with a proto Tyrant that made its appearance in Resident Evil 0, as we watched both Rebecca Chambers and Billy Cohen go up against this behemoth, even in his raw form, as we watch it stand heads above our protagonist, looking menacing as ever, even with the way it twitches, where it showcases its massive claws and the exposed heart and spine.
What is that?
Where we quickly see that even in their earlier models, they were still a force to be dealt with, because this Tyrant was still able to launch at us at incredible speeds, forcing our character to be thrown back if hit by its attacks. But the next model we see was in Resident Evil 1, as we watch Albert Wesker show off his more refined version of this monster, which had the massive claws and exposed heart that was similar to the Proto Tyrant, but lacked the weakness of the exposed spine and twitch anomaly, where it also displays its strength when impaling Albert Wesker and tossing him off like a ragdoll. But this of course would only be a prelude to the encounters with the infamous Tyrant Mr. X from the original Resident Evil 2, as we watch this T-103 base Tyrant dropped off in the RPD station, with its mission is to retrieve the G-Virus, but also eliminate anyone in its path during its mission. But what made this Tyrant unique, especially for its time, was his ability to pursue our characters throughout the game, where we see him break through walls, jump to the 3rd floor of the RPD station, and up until we see him into his Super Tyrant mutation by the end of the game. Also last but not least, let's talk about the iconic Tyrant Nemesis, making his debut in Resident Evil 3, as we watch him make one of the most memorable entrances in Resident Evil history, as we watch him ambush both Jill and Brad in front of the RPD station. So with this monster overall, it built on top of all the great aspects from the previous Tyrants, adding to their menacing foundation, but drove it to a whole new level, as we for the first time see a monster who can outrun our characters, who can also break through areas of the environment, and to the way they wield a rocket launcher. Nemesis was truly a force to be reckoned with, giving us players such a terrifying and great time in Resident Evil 3, showing his endless pursuit of our characters, going to any lengths necessary to finish his mission of eliminating the remaining STARS members and those in his way. Alright, so with the summary of the evolution of the Tyrants video part 1 done, let's move on to the other iterations of the Tyrants and see how they showcase their traits like its predecessors before them. Starting off with the Tyrants in Resident Evil Code Veronica, as we play as Claire Redfield, who was captured by Umbrella while looking for her infamous brother, Chris Redfield. As she traverses through the many environments of this Resident Evil title, we have her fight a new version of these behemoths, looking grossly different compared to his previous brethren, the Bandersnatch. A variation of the Tyrant that looks nothing like his predecessor, lacking that tall and Goliath-like stature that we've come to know at this point in the Resident Evil series. With his one enlarged arm, at first it may look as if it has a large disparity compared to the other hulking Tyrants, but this monster also displays the same relentlessness as those monsters before him, taking full advantage of their elastic arm, using it to make its way throughout their environment with haste, where this monster can also use its far reach to attack Claire from a distance. Tis a way of grabbing a hold of our character's head, immobilizing us, even for a short while. But with all these pros to his elastic arm, he does show that weakness of missing a limb on the left side of his body, which allows us to navigate away from their attacks to a certain degree. But the best solution to deal with them would either be to eliminate them as fast as possible, or run past them and hope that they don't grab a hold of our protagonist. Also on a quick note, we encounter these monsters many times during our playthrough in Code Veronica, sometimes even seeing them in multiples, so we still have to be wary of their presence. Alright, so let's move on to the T-078 Tyrant that we encounter right before we leave Rockford Island, as we see the psychopathic Alfred Ashford release it from his confines in an attempt to stop Claire from escaping, showcasing that typical Tyrant stature, resembling the Super Tyrant from the original Resident Evil 2, but lacking that double claws. Where in this fight, our goal is to incapacitate him as soon as possible because he'll continue onwards towards us, where we see him eventually knock our character back to the flames. But once defeated, we can continue our escape by plane, seeing both Claire and Steve celebrate for a short while until they feel a large rumble.
Hey! What the? The cargo room hatch is open!
I'll go back and check it out.
With Claire checking out the situation, we see her surprised when she sees seeing this Tyrant in the cargo hold, now showcasing his claws from his clubbed arms, where we then start to do battle with this monster, where I personally found it a bit challenging because if hit by any of his swipes or slashes, Claire tends to stagger for a short while, and the Tyrant doesn't even give any pauses for us to stand right back up. He'll continue his onslaught until he eliminates our protagonist, because usually when enemies attack, they tend to back away for a few seconds, giving us a fighting chance, but I guess that battle gameplay is absent with this boss fight. Also, I noticed that he can lunge at us from a short distance, which doesn't help with Claire's situation because the battle arena is very small. Anyways, talking about the environment, we the players are relegated to fighting on one side of the plane preferably, because we don't want to stay on the tail end of the cargo hold because there's a chance of being hit by the Tyrant and flying off the end. Also, this Tyrant displays enormous strength, where we see him attack down on the platform and having the whole plane shake down. To his way of being able to stop a moving cargo from pushing him out of the plane, which reminds me of the crane sequence of the second William Birkin fight from the new Resident Evil 2 remake. But once we deal enough damage, we'll start to notice the Tyrant to move a bit slower and bleed out on the floor, indicating enough damage has been dealt to finally push this Tyrant off the plane. Overall, this monster was a great challenge for us to get over before moving on to the second half of the game, reminding us that these behemoths are no one to be trifled with. Alright, so let's move on to one of my favorite monsters in the Resident Evil universe, and it's the Tyrants from the Resident Evil Damnation movie, where we see multiples of these monsters go up against Leon, showing what the potential of a Tyrant can do in its pinnacle form. With their overall aesthetic and the way they fight Leon really reminded me of the new version of Mr. X, showing their hulking stature heads above our protagonist, wearing his trenchcoat limiter, and with the way how their footsteps sounded. As you can hear those loud and heavy stomps with each step, you can almost feel how heavy they are and the sheer magnitude of their presence. They literally are a walking tank, as we see them take numerous assaults from different weapons and even attacks from lickers. But what I found terrifying with these monsters is the way how they pursue their target, showing how relentless they truly are. There was even one sequence that reminded me of the death scene of Ben from the Resident Evil 2 remake, as we see the Tyrant hold one of the soldiers by the head and crush their skulls with ease. But one of the best scenes in this movie was when we see them release from their trenchcoat limiter, showcasing what a Super Tyrant can do when fully mutated. Showing their incredible speed, but at the same time still retaining that superhuman strength from their base form, which is exemplified when we see one of these monsters take a tank head-on, stopping it in its tracks and lifting it off the ground. And also, mind you, an average tank weighs around 60 tons. Also, I'd like to add a funny moment in the scene, where we see Leon literally smack this Tyrant on the face with his tank's main barrel. Anyways, by the end of the sequence, he would take a tank shot directly to the face to finally beat one of these monsters, showing the great amount of firepower that has to be used to eliminate just one of these behemoths. But this short amount of relief would soon be interrupted when we see two more of these Tyrants chasing after Leon, where they eventually would fall when airstrikes would gun them down, seeing them finally eliminated. Also, on a quick note, the way that the Tyrant fell to his knees while missing the top half of his body was very reminiscent of the Super Tyrant fall in the new remake. All in all, these Tyrants in the Resident Evil Damnation movie truly showed us what the potential of a Super Tyrant can do, which made me think who would win between a fight with these Tyrants in the movie against Nemesis. Anyways, overall, all these Tyrants and their different iterations really helped make the Resident Evil series great, adding a Terminator-like monster who's relentless in their pursuit of finishing their mission, always showing up at the worst possible times to antagonize our protagonist. Anyways, who was your favorite Tyrant of all time in the Resident Evil series? Please let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on this. Also, I just want to give a heads up to the third part of this Evolution of the Tyrants video series is coming out next week, where I'll feature the Tyrants from the Umbrella and Darkside Chronicles to even Ustanak from Resident Evil 6, even though technically he's not a Tyrant. Anyways, I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch my full video. I truly appreciate it, and if you guys did enjoy the content, please feel free to like and subscribe. Also, hit that notification bell so you guys can be alerted when I upload a new video this coming week. Again, thank you guys so much, and as always, you guys have a great rest of your day, and this is Hey DeVuH, signing out.